On the night of March 31st, 1922, a brutal crime took place in Weidhofen, Germany. A family of 6, including a toddler, were murdered in their own home. Their bodies were left to rot inside the farmhouse for days, and when they were finally found, the killer was long gone. But here's the thing, whoever did this didn't leave right away. For 3 days, the murderer lived on the farm with their victims. The cows were fed, the fireplace kept burning, and freshly cooked meals were eaten. Someone was there, going about daily life as if nothing had happened. And to this day, we still don't know who it was. But before we get to the murders, we need to talk about what happened before that night. Because the signs, they were there. 6 months earlier, the family's maid, Crescens Rieger, quit her job. And her reason? She was terrified. She told neighbors the farmhouse was haunted, that she heard whispers in the attic, footsteps moving above her at night. She swore something, or someone, was watching her. And she wasn't wrong. Just weeks before the murders, Andreas Gruber, the head of the family, found something strange outside. Footprints, fresh in the snow. They led from the forest straight to the house, but there were no footprints going back. Whoever made them never left. Then things got weirder. A key to the house went missing. A newspaper from Munich, placed 70 kilometers away, just appeared on their doorstep. No one in the family subscribed to it. None of their neighbors had ordered it, and yet it was there. I don't get that paper, and neither does anyone else around here. Then, on a quiet night just days before the murders, the family heard something. It was late, the farmhouse silent, until it wasn't. Footsteps, above them, around them. Someone was walking in the attic. Andreas grabbed a lantern and searched the entire house. No signs of a break-in, no intruders, nothing. But he knew what he had heard, and so did the rest of his family, and yet they stayed. That decision would cost them everything. Before we continue, we need to talk about them, the Gruber family, because there was something very disturbing going on behind closed doors. Victoria Gabriel was the widowed daughter of Andreas and Cecilia Gruber. Her husband, Karl, was allegedly killed in World War I, but despite being a widow, she had a child, baby Josef, and that's where things get uncomfortable. Andreas Gruber, Victoria's father, had been convicted twice for having an incestuous relationship with her. The village knew. Witnesses knew. Even their former maid had testified about it in court. And Josef? Well, Josef's father has never been confirmed. Some believed he was the child of Victoria's deceased husband, but others believed Josef was actually Andreas's son. And that right there, that might just be the key to this entire case. The night of March 31st, 1922, should have been just like any other night. The family had dinner, locked the doors, and went to bed. But what they didn't know was that someone was already inside the house, and before the sun rose the next morning, they would all be dead. It's the afternoon of March 31st, 1922. A woman named Maria Baumgartner arrives at Hinterkaifeck farm for her first day of work. Her sister had escorted her there and left shortly after. unknowingly becoming the last person to see the residents alive. What happens next is so horrifying, so brutal, that even seasoned investigators would be left shaken. Sometime that evening, the killer or killers got to work. One by one, they lured 4 members of the family: Andreas, his wife Cecilia, their daughter Victoria, and their granddaughter Cecilia Jr., into the barn. There, they were slaughtered. Evidence suggests little Cecilia Jr. didn't die right away. She lay in the straw for hours, tearing out her own hair in agony. After finishing in the barn, the murderer crept into the house. First, they went into the maid's room and killed Maria. Then, they turned to the youngest victim, baby Josef, and struck him down in his cot. The weapon? A mattock, a tool found on the farm. Every single victim had been bludgeoned to death, except Cecilia Jr. She had her throat slit. And here's where things got really disturbing. The killer didn't flee. They stayed. For days. Someone tended to the farm animals. Someone ate food from the family's kitchen, while 6 lifeless bodies lay in the barn in the house. Someone lived there. But there were signs that something was terribly wrong. At around 3 a.m., just hours after the murders, a farmer passing by saw 2 mysterious figures at the edge of the forest near the farm. When he approached, the figures turned their backs, hiding their faces, before disappearing into the trees. The next day, 2 door-to-door salesmen arrived at Hinterkaifeck, hoping to sell coffee. They knocked. No answer. They peered through the windows, saw nothing. But they did notice something strange. The door to the machine house was open, despite the farm being seemingly abandoned. Unnerved, they left. Later that day, 2 hunters stopped by to purchase goods, but there were no people, no chickens roaming the yard, and no smoke rising from the chimney. It was as if the farm had been frozen in time. They too left. And then at 11:30 p.m. that night, something truly unsettling happened. A man named Michael Plöckl was passing the farm when he noticed a flickering light in the oven and smoke rising from the chimney. But the smoke had a foul odor. As he stood there trying to make sense of it, a shadowy figure emerged, holding up a lantern. The figure raised the light to Michael's face, and then, without a word, turned and walked back into the corridor. Michael didn't wait to see what happened next. He ran. In the following days, the family's absence became more and more noticeable. On Sunday, April 2nd, Victoria, a member of the church choir, didn't show up for service. Friends who had planned to walk with her to church knocked on the door, but no one answered. By Monday, Cecilia Jr.'s school marked her absent, and when the postman made his usual deliveries, he noticed something chilling. The mail was piling up. Tuesday, April 4th, a repairman arrives at the farm to fix the food chopper engine. He waits. No one comes to greet him. The only sounds? The animals, and a dog barking inside the barn. After waiting an hour, the repairman decides to start working anyway. That same afternoon, a neighbor named Lorenz Schliedenbauer finally decides to investigate. He sends his 16-year-old son and his 9-year-old stepson to check the farm. They return, saying they saw nothing. So, Lorenz and 2 of his friends, Michael and Jakob, head to Hinterkaifeck themselves. What they find will haunt them forever. The 3 men step into the barn and see something grotesque. Beneath the hay, they find the bodies of Andreas, Cecilia, Victoria, and little Cecilia Jr., their heads brutally bludgeoned and crushed. In shock, Lorenz moves the bodies, contaminating the crime scene. Then, they step into the house using a key, which, strangely, he had. Lorenz unlocks the front door and goes inside. Moments later, he calls out. The others rush in. In the maid's room, they find Maria's corpse, and in the nursery, baby Josef. The entire family had been murdered. When police arrived, the crime scene was already compromised. Neighbors, concerned about the family's silence, had wandered onto the farm, moving bodies, touching evidence, even feeding the animals. The authorities, led by Inspector George Reingruber, did their best to piece together what had happened, but from the very beginning, things just didn't make sense. The family had been killed with a mattock, a type of farming tool, but the weapon wasn't anywhere to be found. The autopsies were done right there in the barn, and the victims' skulls were sent to Munich for further examination. But years later, during World War II, those skulls vanished. Gone. Forever. And if that wasn't strange enough, it was clear the killer, or killers, had stayed on the farm for days after the crime. The cows had been milked, the kitchen's entire bread supply had been eaten, and perhaps most disturbingly, the fireplace was still warm when a passerby came to the house the night after the murders, meaning whoever did this was still inside. With no clear motive, the police rounded up the usual suspects: vagrants, travelers, even craftsmen passing through. But then they began to look closer to the home. And that's when things took a turn for the truly bizarre. Karl Gabriel was dead, or at least that's what everyone thought. Karl was Victoria's husband, a soldier in World War I, who was reportedly killed in action in 1914, but his body never recovered. Rumors swirled that Karl had actually survived the war and returned to Hinterkaifeck for revenge. Why revenge? Because Victoria had been involved in an incestuous relationship with her own father. Some prisoners of war even claimed that a mysterious German-speaking Soviet officer had admitted to being the Hinterkaifeck killer. But Karl's military records were later confirmed. He had died in combat, meaning if he had been seen near the farm in 1918, well, after his supposed death, that would mean only one thing. Someone was lying. If you like a good murder mystery, then you know the killer is usually someone close to the victims. And in this case, that someone might have been their own neighbor. Lorenz Schlittenbauer lived nearby and was one of the first to check on the family when they weren't seen for days. But when he got there, his behavior was unsettling. He had a key to the house. He walked in alone while others waited outside, and when asked why, he simply said, "I was looking for my son." What? Well, here's the thing. Lorenz had been in a relationship with Victoria after his first wife died, and when she gave birth to baby Josef, she claimed Lorenz was the father. But Lorenz didn't believe it. He was convinced Josef's real father was Andreas Gruber, Victoria's father. Lorenz had actually reported the incest to the police in 1919, which led to Andreas being arrested. But Victoria begged him to withdraw his complaint and sued. he did. So now, imagine this. What if Lorenz, angry over the situation, furious at being forced into fatherhood, snapped? What if he took matters into his own hands? Even creepier, years later, a local teacher found Lorenz standing at the site of the now demolished farm. And when asked why he was there, Lorenz casually mentioned that the killer had probably wanted to bury the bodies. But the ground was frozen. Now, how would he know that? Lorenz denied everything until his death in 1941, but the rumors never went away. And then, there was a deathbed confession. In 1951, a woman named Crescentia Mayer told a priest that her two brothers, Anton and Adolf Gump, were responsible for the murders. She even repeated this claim at their father's funeral. The Gumps were distant relatives of the infamous bandit Ferdinand Gump, and it was suspected that Adolf had a romantic relationship with Victoria. Was this a case of jealousy? A lover's quarrel turned deadly? Authorities investigated, but found no solid evidence. The case went cold. Again. So what really happened that night at Hinterkaifeck? Some believe the murderer was a drifter, someone who broke in, killed the family, and then stayed a few days before vanishing into the night. Others insist it to be someone local, someone who knew the farm, knew the victims, and knew how to avoid suspicion. And then there are the paranormal theories. Strange occurrences had been reported at the farm before the murders. Footsteps in the attic, footprints in the snow, a newspaper appearing from nowhere, the family's house key mysteriously going missing. Did something dark and unseen take hold of Hinterkaifeck? Did the killer return because they never truly left? The case officially closed in 1955. No one was ever arrested, no one was ever convicted, and perhaps we will never truly know what happened on that cold, quiet farm over 100 years ago.